Thanks for tuning in. Ham Talk Live will be on the air shortly. Please stand by. Thanks for tuning in. Ham Talk Live will be on the air shortly. Please stand by.
It's Ham Radio with Neil Rapp. Here we go. Welcome to Ham Talk Live. Call in, let's talk. Neil's your guy. Ham Talk Live. Here we go on Ham Talk Radio.
Good evening, everyone. This is Ham Talk Live, episode number 5. Bob Allphin, K4UEE. Recorded live on Thursday, March 17th, 2016. I'm your host, Neil Rapp, WB9VPG. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Ham Talk Live. Tonight on the show, Bob Allphin, K4UEE, will join us. Bob will be talking about how he's able to organize all these big top 10 most wanted DXpeditions and the videos that he has that documents those trips, and we'll be taking your calls live in just a few minutes. Last week on the big show, Tom Vinson, NY0V, was here to talk about his trip to Myanmar to work with Boy Scouts and Girl Guides, and I hope you will support Tom in those efforts to bring ham radio back to Myanmar. If you missed that show or any future show, you can listen to the replay on hamtalklive.com, or it's also on Spreaker, TuneIn, iTunes, SoundCloud, or YouTube. And this week we've added Stitcher, and we've added everything for Google Play, but the Google Play podcast option is not released yet. So it's ready to go. As soon as they're ready to go, we'll be on it. And we're also pending on iHeart Podcasts, so hopefully we'll be on there in the next week or so. Tonight we want to take your calls as always, so in just a few minutes, be ready to call in. You can call us on Skype, and the username is Ham Talk Live, or you can call us by telephone. That phone number again is 812-NET-HAM-1. That's 812-638-4261. My guest this evening is Bob Allphin, K4UEE, and Bob's home QTH is the metro Atlanta, Georgia area. Bob has either participated, led, or co-led DXpeditions to 11 of the top 10 most wanted DXCC entities. Bob has 11 DXpedition of the Year awards and has participated in 38 DXpeditions total. Since retiring, Bob's made DXpeditions his full-time job, and he's a member of the CQDX Hall of Fame, as well as many, many other recognitions. So, Bob, welcome to Ham Talk Live.
Thank you, Neil. It's a pleasure to be here. I appreciate the opportunity.
Bob, take us back briefly and talk about how you got started in ham radio and what your background is, to just kind of bring us up to the DXpeditions.
Okie doke. Well, it started in the Boy Scouts. I was probably 9 years old, and the Scoutmaster happened to be a ham, and we had the radio merit badge back in those days. So we built a crystal set, and wrapped the wire around that piece of cardboard that was in toilet paper tissue.
Yep.
And made a coil, and I had some old World War II headphones. We had a little detector there, a germanium diode, and we started listening on that with an antenna hung out the window, and I could hear music. I could hear people talking. It was coming through the air, and I don't know. It just kind of hit me at that age. It was magic. I just couldn't believe that you could hear intelligence coming through the air. And frankly, here we are some 57 years later, I guess, and it's still magic.
Yeah, it is. And you don't let the magic smoke out.
No,
If you
that's
let the
right.
magic smoke out, everything stops working.
So that was kind of the beginning. Now that was 8 or 9 years old, and it took me. I guess I took my novice test when I was 14, so I kind of played around with it for 3 to 5 years as a SWL, and finally found an Elmer who said, "Just take my arm, young man, and I'll show you what to do, and I'll give you the test." And I remember waiting after taking the test. I don't think I think you knew whether you passed or not, but you didn't know when the license was going to come. So I would run to the mailbox every day for about 5 or 6 weeks. And one of my favorite stories, and I hope your listeners haven't heard it before. It's kind of cute. I was ready to go. I got the license in the mail, and I got K4UEE, and I thought, well, okay, that's all right. Could have been worse. Could have been ZXV or something.
Yep, yep.
But so I went and called CQ. I had an 80-meter transmitter and about 20 watts out. Called CQ for about an hour on 80 meters, 3514. And then somebody answered me. And I was so excited that I got up and I ran around the house yelling, "Somebody's calling me, somebody's calling me, what do I do?" And my mom says, "Well, why don't you go answer him?" Oh, okay. And it turned out to be a guy I was in Birmingham at that point. My dad was in the military and we were stationed. This guy that answered me was in Gadsden, which is about 60 miles away. But, I just thought that was big DX. And of course, we were talking to each other at about 5.5 words a minute. So I'm sure the conversation took forever. But I think, like I said earlier, it's magic even today. And then later on, I got my general license, and 3 or 4 months later, and I continued to work on 80 meters, and I worked Europe on 80, and I worked New Zealand and Australia on 80, and I worked all over South America on 80 meters. And I said, this is really something. And of course, it's a lot easier on the higher bands, but I got interested in the low bands, and I've always been a low band enthusiast because I think that's where the big thrill is when you make a QSO with a guy that's a long way away, and he's in the noise and weak. That's just kind of my thing. And of course, I'm a CW guy, and most of my QSOs are on CW, so that's kind of how I got started. Shortly after that, my dad was transferred overseas, and so I went and finished high school in Okinawa. And back then, Okinawa was a separate DXCC entity. It was KR6, and I was KR6LY, KR6 Lonesome Yankee. And that's the first time I'd been on the other end of pileups. And frankly, I loved it. It was addictive, and I think that's probably when the bug, the DXpedition bug, bit. And of course, when it bit, it bit and is still biting today.
Yeah, it bit well. So how did you go from that to something so treacherous, I guess is the word I'm looking for, as going to Peter One Island?
Well, that's a great question, Neil. Peter One was about 10 years ago, and I had done a number of expeditions. I'd been invited on them, or I had an opportunity to lead or co-lead a number. But I was always interested in activating really the rare ones, the ones that only come on the air every 15 or 20 years because, they're really out of the way. They're hard to get to. It costs a lot of money. There's nobody that lives there. And so I became fixated on Peter One, which is about 300 miles off the western coast of Antarctica, for those that are not quite sure where that is. We had a couple of missteps with transportation and that kind of thing, and it took about 3 years to pull it off. And virtually about all I did during that 3 years, I had retired at that point, and all I did was work on making that come to happen. And finally, in this time 10 years ago, February of 2006, we got it done and made about 80,000 QSOs, used helicopters to get on and off the island. We did have some bad weather, and we were, socked in a number of times. And in fact, our departure was delayed because of bad weather. It was my second time down in that part of the world, and I really love it down there. But it is, as you said, it's very treacherous. Since then, there have been a number of other expeditions, as you mentioned, I think in your introduction, that I have activated or been on a team that's activated 11 of the top teners. Some people have a little trouble with that math. How can you activate 11 top teners? If I told you I was going to activate 12 and 13 top teners, then you'd know what I've got in my future. But anyway, they don't stay in the top 10, of course, if you do a good job when you go there. So new ones come on. But that's kind of what I do. I've got a spirit of adventure, and I guess a lot of it has to do with the fact that I traveled a lot when my dad was in the service, and I don't have any trouble getting on an airplane or getting on a boat or getting on a train or a bus and going someplace new. I think it's a great thrill.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I have some connection, and we were talking before the show with the Peter One thing, so we'll talk about that in a little bit. But that's why I brought that particular one up. But it just seems so treacherous. So how do you plan for this? Now, in the video, I saw, some footage of you guys sitting in I think it was a Holiday Inn or something in the conference room and talking about those kinds of things. How do you go about organizing one of these trips?
Well, that also is a very good question, and that's one of the reasons that these things take so long to pull together. First of all, to be in the top 10 or to be rare, there's some reason for that. As I said earlier, they're way out of the way, hard to get to, expensive. The other thing is that there's usually some kind of a impediment, either a government agency that has say over the island and controls access to the island, or a government that doesn't allow amateur radio. North Korea is a good example. But so one of the things that has to happen is you've got to get a permit, and that can take, in the case of the last one we activated, Navassa, a year ago, it took 13 years to get the permit from U.S. Fish and Wildlife. So a lot of the time is spent doing that. The other thing, of course, have to do with the equipment and the personnel. And, I've got a list of people that I've been with before, and those people have a list of, I'm on a number of lists. And so if something comes up, I usually get a call, and they know they're going to get a call. So these are people that I've been with before, and I know I can trust them. And I know if we have a serious situation of some kind that they're not going to panic. And I know that they've got the money to pay their share, and I know they've got the time, to take 6 or 7 weeks off, because these trips, particularly the Antarctic, it takes 2 weeks to get there, and you're 2 weeks on the island and 2 weeks back. I mean, that's 6 weeks out of your life away from work or home or whatever. So once you can build a team, then it's a matter. I just delegate and kind of, take the position of the supervisor, I guess, and I ask people to do different jobs that have to be done, and then they report back, and we tweak it and change it if necessary, and everybody has a role to play. But probably the most valuable thing I could tell you right now, Neil, is that what you have to do is you have to envision every possible situation that you can find yourself in. For example, the easy things are, we want to have how many stations, that will require how many radios, how many amps, how many generators, how many antennas, and how many operators. That's kind of easy. We've got to feed the operators. We've got to house the operators. So now, how are we going to do that? How much food does it take? Who's going to handle that? Who's going to find the shelters? Who's going to erect the shelters? And then, that's all kind of straightforward, and we've done it enough that we've got it pretty well down pat. But when it comes to envisioning circumstances that are unlikely but could be disastrous, that's a whole different deal, because you've got to really think outside the box. You've got to say, well, what if this happens? What do we do? How are we prepared for that? How do we react to it? How do we recover from it? How do we get off the island? And that's also something you just kind of learn. And if you surround yourself with good people, like I try to do, we've got a lot of good brain power. So we're very fortunate to be able to say that we've never had any serious accidents or anything that has not gone pretty much as we planned it. And that's I need to knock on wood, and I'll do that right now. So I hope that's helpful. And we do try to capture that as much as we can in the videos.
Yeah. Now, speaking of the videos, one of the things that I don't think you knew about until today was that there was a little connection with the video and some of the things that I do, because I teach high school and I sponsor a high school amateur radio club, and one day I decided that I was going to show the video from the Peter 1 DXpedition. And so we watched it, and there was a little drama there at the end because storm moved in, and we're like, okay, now how are we going to get everybody off the island? And we've got a couple of people still over there and some stuff still over there, and how are we going to do that? And so that actually inspired one of my students to turn his family vacation that summer to Cyprus into a DXpedition. And so he took a radio and a battery and an antenna and a buddy pole and set up at different places around Cyprus, and he ended up writing an article for QST. One of his pictures ended up being the cover photo on QST, and he got the cover plaque award. And one thing leads to another, and he's speaking at Dayton about it. He's speaking at other clubs about it. And Dr. Scott Wright and I nominate him for the Young Ham of the Year award. He gets the Young Ham of the Year award. He gets the Hiram Percy Maxim award. He gets the Goldfarb Scholarship. It just sweeps everything. And it all comes back to that one video. Showing that one video of that DXpedition sparked that whole chain of events.
Wow. I just heard this story, before we went on the air, and I was really touched by it. I always think that these videos are going to play a role somehow in getting somebody interested in the hobby. I hope that they have that role. And now you've given me evidence of that. I think it's a great story. And when I see you in Dayton, Neil, this year, if that young man is there, I'd love to meet him.
Well, I know his sister's going to be there, and his mother. I'm not sure if he will. He's actually at Cornell right now, and his final exams are usually at that point. But if there's a way to make that work, I will certainly make that happen.
Yeah, I'd like that very much. That's a great story. Makes me feel good.
Yeah, so those videos do play a wonderful role, and if you haven't seen any of those videos, they make a great club meeting. You can pop it in and let it go, and they're quite interesting. And so talk about just briefly how people can get a hold of those videos and what the money goes toward and which ones are out there.
Yeah, okay. I guess this is the commercial
Yes,
part.
This is the commercial part.
On my website, K4UEE.com, there is a section of that you can click on that shows you the DVDs. We've done 10 of them over the years, and they're all good. They're all interesting, and different expeditions all over the world. In fact, I had an opportunity to look at some that we did almost 10 years ago recently, and I was amazed at how what a good job we did. But the really big ones, Peter One and Amsterdam Island and Desiceo and Malpelo and last year Navassa, they are all well chronicled in those DVDs, and they run anywhere from about 35 or 40 minutes to as much as an hour. So you're getting your money's worth. And I do most of the filming. I'm not much of an editor. In fact, I'm not an editor at all. So I hire professional editors to do the work, and I'm just real pleased with the outcome. We sell them for $25 a piece, and includes shipping worldwide. And our expenses are, when you figure in the cost of the editor and duplicating and postage and all of that kind of stuff, we probably make about $4 or $5 on each one. And then we just kind of divide that up, and I take my portion and I put it in the DXpedition pot for the next adventure. So if you have an interest in that, as Neil said, they're great for club meetings. They're great for getting young people interested in the hobby, as we just heard a good example of that. So it's K4UEE.com, and then click on the DVD section. And any orders that you place would be greatly appreciated, and we'll get the DVDs out to you right away.
And those are also available at a few assorted places. I know I picked mine up at the Huntsville Hamfest, and at Dayton, I believe.
Yeah, DX Engineering handles them, ARRL handles them, Gigaparts handles them, MFJs handles them. That's not their main business, but they've got them available. So that's another way you could get a hold of them. And I guess I should mention also that if you order 3 at a time, I discount the price from $75 down to $60, so you can get 3 of them for an average of $20 a piece. And if you order the whole set of 10, and a number of people have done that, it's $175, and so your per DVD price is down to about $17.50. So that's all on the website, and that's something to think about. Thanks for the opportunity to talk about this. It's fun. It's great stuff.
Oh, absolutely. Well, speaking of ads, it's time for us to take a break and get an ad in here. And I know we've got at least one caller who's been trying to get through, and it's Dr. Scott Wright. He sent me a tweet a while ago, so I know he's going to ask you some questions, and we'll take some other callers here.
Scott.
Oh, yeah. Uh-oh, Scott. I hope you didn't hear that.
He'll ask questions.
Yeah, he'll ask the tough ones. So anyway, we'll take your calls here when we come back from the break. But right now, let's hear a word from one of our sponsors, Tower Electronics, right here on Ham Talk Live.
This episode of Ham Talk Live is brought to you by Tower Electronics. Tower Electronics has been the Ham's dime store since 1978, bringing connectors, antennas, cables, and other parts to the world. Scott and Jill travel the country bringing their store to you at Hamfest, but you can also order online at pl-259.com or by calling 920-435-2973. Stock up on those supplies like PL259 and end connectors, audio cables, mobile antennas, and ham sticks. Their silver-plated end connectors are even in use on the International Space Station. Tower Electronics is a dealer for MFJ, Comet, Daiwa, OPEC, Workman, and Ham Pro Technologies. Tower Electronics online at pl-259.com, proud to sponsor this episode of Ham Talk Live.
Oh, yeah. You're talking ham radio, baby. You're listening to Ham Talk Live with Neil Rapp.
Welcome back to Ham Talk Live. Thanks to the support of Tower Electronics to help bring Ham Talk Live to you each week. Some of their upcoming shows are the Toledo, Ohio Ham Fest on March 20th and also Mobile, Alabama on April 9th. Be sure to listen to the show every Thursday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Time right here on hamtalklive.com. Also, check out our Facebook page and our Twitter feed. Just search for Ham Talk Live. Bob Allphin, K4UEE, is our guest this evening, and we're going to start taking some calls now. So feel free to give us a call. The best way to do that is with Skype. Give us an audio call on Skype at Ham Talk Live, or if Skype isn't your thing, you can call us on telephone at 812-NET-HAM1. That's 812-638-4261. So, Bob, I went ahead and took the call during the break here. We are joined by K4UEE, Dr. Scott Wright, and so I know you said you didn't want to talk to him, but hopefully that was just sarcasm. Scott, how you doing tonight?
I'm great, thank you. And Bob, good evening. I look forward to seeing you in the near future and at Dayton. And Neil, I just first wanted to say to Bob, on behalf of so many of us who are DXers, thank you for all the work and time over the last 15 or 20 years that you've put in activating the rarest of the rare. I've had a glimpse into some of your DXpeditions, not having been able to go, but having been invited, and I know the leadership and time and the 100 hours a week that you and other co-leaders put in. So I just want to publicly say thank you for all your hard work and look forward to you leading another one in the near future. I wondered, Bob, if you could share with the listeners just a little bit about Mary, your wonderful wife, who is so generous to give us so much of your time in the hobby. And secondly, if you had any thoughts about how we can get more young people involved in ham radio. Today's ARRL newsletter has a picture of a teenager who just did DXCC and worked all states. I think he's 14 or 15, and the new ARRL CEO took a picture with him at League giving him the certificates. And we need more people like that and like Neil's students. Neil's doing it right in Bloomington, but most of us can't seem to get as many young people involved in DXing and contesting. So those are the only questions I have, Bob, and I'm wondering if you have some answers.
No, I don't, Scott. I'm just kidding. There's nothing I'd like more than to talk about my wife, Mary, because she's an integral part of all of this. We've been married 49 years now, and it's looking pretty good for 50, so happy about that. But, you know, the bottom line is I couldn't do what I do without her blessing. I think in the old days, Scott, we used to refer to that as a kitchen pass. You know, I've got to get a kitchen pass, but most people don't get them for 6 and 7 weeks at a time. So we often joke about the fact that, you know, maybe she wants to get rid of me. So when I come back, you know, there's a great reunion, and she says, how's it going, and so on and so forth. Where, you know, everything's fine for a couple of weeks. Then suddenly one night she'll say, so when are you going again? Sort of like, gosh, you've been home a long time, 2 weeks. I'm just kidding, of course. She's a great gal, and, you know, that's, again, I couldn't, none of us could do what we do without that kind of support. As far as getting some of the young people involved in this hobby, I've got a couple of thoughts there. Again, Neil was telling me earlier about what he's doing in the high school there and sponsoring the ham club, and apparently he's been very successful. But there's a big wide world full of young kids that are bright and interested in really cool things. And I've always thought that maybe one of the ways we might approach this is to point out to them that amateur radio is really the first wireless. You know, there's all this talk about wireless technology. Well, we've been doing it for 100 years. And are you all hearing me okay?
Yeah, I think there's just a little echo coming back through Scott's phone there.
So, I mean, that's maybe that's one way to break the ice. But um, I think the aspects of the hobby that are probably would be of most interest to today's generation would be contesting and DXing. Um, my understanding is that there's an awful lot of gaming that's going on, and it's very, very popular. Well, there's no better gaming than what we do on on weekend contests on the radio, and that's a good way to get them interested, I think. And DXing, of course, um, if I think the idea is to combine the amateur radio aspect of DXing with the adventure of DXing, because these kids are no different than we were when we were young. They've got a spirit of adventure, and they want to see the world, and they want to meet new people, and climb mountains and swim oceans and that kind of stuff. And that's you can do that. You can do that through the radio, sitting in your den or in your bedroom, but you can also do that by getting on an airplane or getting on a boat with some other guys and go someplace really interesting and do a DXpedition. And I just think that would be something that would attract these young folks to the hobby. What do you think, Scott?
I have to agree, Bob. I think we have to engage the culture that they have of travel adventure, and I think many of them do like gaming, and I also think we need to figure out a way that adults like the three of us who have knowledge and extra equipment can help youngsters and teenagers out who don't have much of a budget, or parents who see a need for investment in the hobby, and to help them get started and just spend some time mentoring them as well. I think that's important, but I'll tell you, if we could have a school club station like what Neil Rapp has in Bloomington and every town in America, ham radio would double its membership in 10 years. Neil, my congratulations to all you do at Bloomington South. Bob, I don't know if you're aware of this, but Neil brought 3 students to Contest University last May, and they took up a challenge, and they worked DXCC by the time in one contest weekend, CQ Worldwide Sideband.
Wow.
Very impressed with the club station and what he did with a 2-element stepper Yagi, and that's about it, I think, right, Neil?
Yeah, that's about it.
Wow.
Well, thanks you, Scott. I appreciate your kind words.
Everyone have a good evening. Thank
All
you.
right.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Scott. And I will throw out, too, there is a group, and I don't have it in front of me, but there is a group that organizes a youth DXpedition trip where they take a parent along and a child along and do go. I know they did Costa Rica here not long ago. And that's been available most years. I think last year they weren't able to pull it off, but they have one, and the RSGB has one also. They have a youth DXpedition where they go out to a remote area and then set up. And in fact, one of my students was planning on going to that and wasn't able to get it worked out, but there are some trips set up just for youth to go on these DXpeditions.
Yeah, Neil, I know a little bit about that program here in the States. It's run by a fellow that was on the Peter 1 expedition, actually, Don DeBon, and N6JRL, who lives in Dayton, as a matter of fact. And I know that this year they're going to the island of Saba down in the Caribbean. And I was just down there about 3 weeks ago for an international contest, and the owner of the station down there is really, really excited about having these young hams come in and with their parents, and it's going to be a great experience. This is a beautiful island, and it doesn't have the big glitzy hotels and casinos. In fact, it doesn't even have a beach. But if you like to scuba dive or snorkel or climb mountains or do ham radio, it's a really interesting place, and I know the kids that are going to participate in that will have a ball.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. So there are some limited trips out there, for youth. So that is one option. Well, it's time to take our final break, but we'll be back with more with Bob Allphin right after this message from the Ham Station here on Ham Talk Live. This episode of Ham Talk Live is brought to you by the Ham Station. For 35 years, the Ham Station has brought new and used radios, antennas, accessories, and equipment to the amateur radio community. Give Jeff or Dan a call at 1-800-729-4373 or order online at hamstation.com. Ham Station carries all the major brands like ICOM, Yaesu, and Kenwood. Shop from a wide selection of radio scanners, MFJ accessories, Heil Sound products, Mirage and Ameritron amplifiers, Cushcraft antennas, and more. Easy online shopping and fast shipping are waiting for you at hamstation.com or call 1-800-729-4373. The Ham Station, proud to sponsor this episode of Ham Talk Live.
You're listening to Ham Talk Live with Neil Rapp.
And welcome back to Ham Talk Live. We'd like to thank the Ham Station for sponsoring the show. Give Dan or Jeff a call at 800-729-7343 or visit hamstation.com for your next rig. Bob Allphin, K4UEE, is our guest this evening, and we do have some time for some more calls, so give us a call on Skype at Ham Talk Live or by telephone at 812-NET-HAM1. Okay, Bob, we're back with you now, and tell us what a typical day would be for an operator on one of those DXpeditions. What would a typical day look like?
That's a good question as well. Obviously, at the very beginning, when we first get to our location, we basically have to build what I like to call the radio city, because these places, we're usually not in a hotel, and we usually did not fly in. We, at least on commercial airlines, we had helicopters or we had icebreakers, or somehow or other we got there. So there's no hotel. We've got to set up our own shelters. We've got to set up our kitchen. We've got to get everything organized before we ever put up the first antenna. So we've got to build that city that's going to support anywhere from 15 to 20 men for the next couple of weeks. Then, once that infrastructure is built, then you begin putting the stations together and you begin putting up the antennas, and you begin going on the air. The bulk of the time, let's say it's a 2 week expedition, the bulk of the time, maybe 12 of those days, is pretty routine, frankly. You just basically operate, you sleep, you fix things that break, and you eat. And you just do that over and over and over again for 12 days. Typically, you will operate on 3 or 4 hour shifts, and you will usually have 3 or 4 shifts in each 24-hour period. So, for example, on Navassa, the last expedition this time last year, we used 3-hour shifts, and most of us were running 4 shifts a day. So we were on the air 12 hours a day for 11 days. And the rest of the time, as you might imagine, we're in our bunks, or having something to eat, or there was time to do some exploring, and it's a very interesting island. But it's you settle into a routine. I call it DXpedition mode. And then when you get near the end and you shut things down and everything comes down, the good news is it comes down about 3 times faster than it went up. You pack it on the helicopter, or you get it to the boat or whatever, and you're on your way again, and that's when the celebration begins, because usually we've been fortunate enough to make an awful lot of QSOs. I don't think we've let anybody down in terms of the number of contacts that we make. And so we're proud of that. We're happy that we were able to do it. And, it's another adventure that we've successfully completed. And there's usually talk about where do we go next? Talk about the next one.
So if you had to choose between warm or cold, you've done both extremes, which one would you pick?
Oh my. It's really not quite that simple, Neil. um,
There are bugs.
If you're cold, the challenge is to stay warm, and if you're warm, the challenge is to cool off. So there's nothing that's particularly comfortable about either of those alternatives. But I can say that the Antarctic region, I've been down there 3 times. Heard Island in 1997, and then South Sandwich and South Georgia in 2002, and then Peter 1 in 2006. It is like, in that area of the world, it's like leaving planet Earth and going to Mars. It is so different. The animals, the weather, the wind, the rain, the snow, the sleet, the volcanoes, the glaciers. It's like another world, and that it's addictive. And I want to go back. On the other hand, I've never been so cold in my life as I was, down there, particularly in Peter 1. There's a quick story if we've got time. I think the coldest.
2 minutes.
Okay, the coldest I've ever been was on Peter 1. Typically, temperatures were in the teens, but the wind was the problem, blowing 30, 40, 50, 60 miles an hour. But we wore 4 or 5 layers, so you weren't really cold. But when it was time to undress and take off all those layers and get into your sleeping bag, there was a period of about 30 or 40 seconds there where you didn't have any clothing on, or you had 1 layer on. And of course, in the tent, if it's 18 outside, it's 17 or 19 in the tent. So then you spend the next 30 minutes trying to warm up. So that is the coldest point. It's very awkward when you're changing from fully clothed to hardly clothed and trying to climb into that sleeping bag.
Yeah, I'm sure that's quite an adventure, and I was glad to follow along with that with the video, and then one of my other former students, his uncle was on that trip, and so had a little connection there, and heard a lot about it, and it just doesn't get much colder than that.
No. I think it's the temperature wasn't that bad, but the wind chill was deadly.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, we thank you for doing that and all these other DXpeditions, and we look forward to the next one.
Well, I think that there are probably 2 that I'm aware of in the next couple of years, and they also will be the top teners. Of course, I can't let the cat out of the bag right now, but they're most likely going to happen, and at some point I got to hang up my spurs, but not yet.
Well, we thank you for doing that, and we'll anxiously wait to hear where those are. So that's a wrap for this week's edition of Ham Talk Live. I'd like to thank my guest, Bob Allphin, K4UEE, and all the callers and listeners out there in cyberspace. And I invite you back next Thursday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Time when my guest will be Gary West, K8DEV. He's from the Westchester Amateur Radio Association and the Voice of America Museum near Westchester, Ohio. Gary and some of the officers will be here to talk about the museum, the club station at the museum, and a special opportunity coming up soon for you to visit. And for a complete list, visit our website. For now, with Bob Allphin and Technical assistant Nick Bauer. This is Neil Rapp, WB9VPG, saying 7375, and may the good DX be yours.